Today I'm visiting the keep at Castle Rising, in the village of Castle Rising in North Norfolk, which is only a few miles from the town of King's Lynn and a very short distance from the Lincolnshire border. The castle was created shortly after the year 1139 by a Norman settler, a man by the name of William de Albini, who married the widow of King Henry I, which gave him, a man of modest means, access to huge sums of money. And he created this castle for no other reason than social status. This part of Norfolk wasn't considered to be an area that was subject to attacks by brigands and rogue barons. In fact, it was a peaceful rural area. This man wanted to create himself as somebody important, and in fact, he was regarded as being rather puffed up, boorish, and an arrogant little man. And the only person that he gave deference or respect to was the king, and upon everybody else he looked down upon them. As part of his social climbing status, apart from marrying the widow of King Henry I, he also built a castle at Buckingham in Norfolk, and also carried out further improvement work to Arundel Castle, which is in Sussex. Massive resources were required to build and improve Castle Rising. It had huge outer defensive walls, a huge moat, and a range of religious and military buildings. Without doubt, should an enemy had broached the subject of attacking this castle, they would have had grave difficulty in actually bringing it down. However, in the year 1145, William got permission from King Stephen to actually mint coins from the castle. And as part of that, he had settled a community of Jewish people in the village who later moved to the town of King's Lynn. As one can imagine, William had a lot of grand ideas, and grand schemes ran in their millions, and no doubt also depleted the wealth that he inherited as a result of marrying the widow of King Henry I. He built 3 outer baileys here in the castle. Most castles require 1, perhaps 2, but here he was trying to make a social statement. He had the castle erected on top a heavy ramp which raised the promontory of the castle much higher than the surrounding low, flat farmland. However grandiose and wonderful his schemes were, they were not to be, because he died without issue. In the year 1243, the entire estate was inherited by another settler from the Norman families, a man by the name of Roger de Montault. The de Montault family were a very powerful baronial family, and they had few possessions, and certainly their estates were virtually worthless, and so the estate was eventually reverted to the possession of the crown for the sale of 10,000 marks by his younger brother Robert in the year 1323. Now here the history of Castle Rising gets even more interesting. When the sale or the reversion of the rights of the ownership of the castle passed to the state, it actually passed into the hands of Queen Isabella of France and a man by the name of Roger Mortimer. She was acting as regent while her son, Edward III, was allowed to develop as a normal youth before acquiring the princely reins of power from the state. And of course it was during this period that much intrigue was being created. By the year 1330, Isabella sadly fell from grace. She was toppled by her younger son, Edward III, and local legend here confuses historical fact. According to local legend, she was imprisoned here at Castle Rising for her entire life, dying in the year 1358, and that it was said that she went mad in the later years and had been seen as a ghost running around the castle screaming her head off. And for sure, a number of people actually visiting the castle over the years have engaged this particular type of manifestation. But is it really Queen Isabella? What really happened to Queen Isabella was the fact that after a short period of house arrest, her son released her and she was handsomely rewarded as the Queen's mother. In fact, Edward granted to her several royal residencies and castles, including Castle Rising, which she used frequently as a base for travelling the country. And certainly her wealth was quite extensive. She employed an army of servants, pages, artists, acrobats, actors to entertain and look after her, particularly so in her later years. So far from being the woman that went mad and died being confined in the castle, she actually lived a relatively healthy and free life. Interestingly, after Isabella's death, the estate passed to her grandson, Edward the Black Prince, and he held tenure over this estate, which became part of the Duchy of Cornwall, and he died in the year 1357. Sadly, following the Black Prince, the castle had, shall we say, mixed fortunes. What happened from there onwards, a number of repairs were carried out to the building and improvements were made, but also gradually, as it passed from hand to hand, the castle became dilapidated and rather run down. However, during this period, its use was mostly as a hunting facility rather than as a castle defensive. And this site certainly became very popular for hunting. In fact, Mary Tudor herself actually stayed in the castle along with a number of noble dignitaries over the centuries. In the year 1544, Henry VIII passed the estate to the Howard family, the Dukes of Norfolk, and to a Thomas Howard. He was faced with an immense bill in repairing and putting the castle straight. The ownership of the castle remained in the Howard family's possession until the 20th century, when the estate here was passed over into the care of English Heritage. Today, a current descendant of the Howard family is actually involved with the administration of the site, and the site provides much interest to tourists that visit this part of Norfolk. But the important part is, for me at least, is the ghostly history associated with the site. It's worth mentioning that these rather crude archways were actually built later when the roof disappeared off the castle and other parts of the building became so dilapidated that people weren't able to travel around the building comfortably and protected of course by the walls of the keep. It was necessary for them to punch a number of holes through walls, supporting walls, which bring me all the way through to this part of the castle. I'm actually standing in the basement of what would have been the Great Hall of the castle. And below me is the well, which was an incredibly important part of maintaining security within the castle, because they were able to supply themselves with as much water as they needed in the event of a long and lengthy siege. But looking at this today, the bare walls are well maintained, but one can see that a number of floors have long since disappeared, and of course the entire site at this point of the castle is completely open to the elements. But having said that, this is an amazing building, and one which I'm going to remember for a long time to come. And thank you very much for joining me here today.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. This one. Someone talking through it. Hello? Hello? You can walk further now. Voice through there, and when I got out there, it's going across this wooden floorboards like this, and someone was walking across it as I went out there, as if they were trying to get away. Apart from that. I don't know if the camera picked it up. What do you get? Well, I've got it running at the moment over there. I'm taking some photos, and I've just called out and said if anybody here wants to talk to us, you can come forward and talk about it. I was looking out there, that's wow. I heard a man's voice through there, got up and said to the camera, I don't know if you heard that, there's an angel. So as I was climbing up them stairs, you know they've got the wooden floorboards that go around, someone went along that wooden floorboard.
We're currently in the Keep 4 building, and this room appears to be, as far as I'm concerned, and the rest of the team, to be the most active in terms of weird noises and sounds that have been encountered here today. And certainly from your point, Sean, what did you experience?
Well, in here, I heard a woman's voice. Also, when me and Tim was in here, we heard like a tapping on the window, didn't we?
Yeah.
And also, when we was filming earlier, we also got a whiff of really strong tobacco for a couple of seconds.
There was, yeah.
Yeah, and also, earlier on when I was walking around the castle, someone was running away from me because I heard a man's voice, and then when I asked who was there, I heard someone running across the floorboards, and also I've been touched as well.
He's certainly touched. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, similar. I heard the rapping on the window and sounded like somebody moving around on the floorboard, and the smell as well. So,
but couldn't the rapping on the window, could that not have been the wind or a breeze?
well, it could have been, but if you look at the trees outside,
It's not happening now. It's not happening now.
It's not happening now,
It's been
but
the same weather all day.
no, I would stand by that in the sense that earlier it was very, very noisy here. What I'm going to try to do before we go from this site today, this is the paranormal add-on, which I always add to the documentaries. I'm going to try and reach out, all of us, and see if we can pick up any form of EVP or perhaps some other indication of spiritual presence. What am I feeling here at the moment? I've just started to open up to what I can sense and feel. I can feel something that it's almost like a residual energy. It's a horrible feeling. It's a feeling of anger and even lust to a point. I can just feel this very greedy presence. It feels completely negative and very neutral. But I don't think that what I'm feeling is part of the entire spectral history of this particular building. And so what I'm going to do is try and open up a little bit more and hope that we can pick up something which we can share with you. I can feel your presences here with us today. We have come here in love, light and peace. We just wish to make peaceful and friendly contact. Haven't come here to cause any issues. We've shown great respect to this building and respect to those who are in spirit here. We wondered whether or not you would give us some indication before we go of your presence, whether it be a noise, a tap, or some other type of attention grabber. And apart from slamming doors, there was a little bang there, wasn't there?
Came from up there, didn't it?
Came from upstairs. Please, can you give us an indication of your presence? Is the spirit of Queen Isabella, are you still here? I felt a feminine presence wandering around. Could somebody in spirit here, the guardian of the castle perhaps, somebody of importance, could you give us an indication that you can hear us? It seems strange that every time I speak, we hear an acknowledging knock, and this happens a lot here. Okay, let's work on the basis that there is a level of communication there. Every time I've spoken and asked for a sign or indication of a presence, we've heard a knock. So I'm going to ask you this question one more time, just to confirm that it's yourself who's doing this. If you are present with us at this moment, could you make that noise again, please, as an acknowledgement? And it's back again. Thank you. It's a very, very cold building, as you can imagine, and particularly so in the winter. It's even colder inside than it is outside. But there's certainly a strong energy around here. You can feel it? Can you feel it?
Yep.
Do one of you guys want to ask?
Let's see if I can do it all day.
Tim?
Okay, we're here to find out more about what is in this castle, and if you can make a sound from the spirit world, or make a noise, or drop something.
I just see very, very quickly, just as you finished talking, I saw a light anomaly. It was just like a long streak, which was which was vertical, and it actually moved very, very slowly across the window, and it just faded. As it moved, you could see it briefly, then it faded into the light. I know that you're here, we can feel your presence with us, but could you please, could you say something? It's weird, isn't it?
Sounds like
It's very, very odd.
Like a huge range of somebody tapping a tune almost, that, wasn't it?
Very, very odd. I'm afraid we could be here for the rest of the day. I'm hoping that we may have picked up something on the other shots that we've done, but it's certainly been interesting here today, and I hope that we've got something there to share. And who knows, we may even have a ghost.
Oh, good. Certainly something though.
Okay, I think it's time for us to...
Yeah.
Yeah. This is simply splendid. I'm actually in St John's Church in Duxford, a church which sadly was made redundant in the year 1870, but by a stroke of luck has allowed this building to continue very much in its original form. It dates from the 1100s, but by 1870 the church was redundant, and so no Victorian improvements were carried out inside this building. And what we're left with today is an amazingly well-preserved medieval church with original fragments of wall paintings. But the wall paintings in this building are immense and under many, many layers of paint. So if you removed a wall painting, shall we say, from the late 15th century, underneath we could have something from the 11th century. And this has been a subject of a great deal of conservation work over the years. And now, of course, the building is in the charge of the Church's Conservation Trust, and they have ploughed a considerable amount of money into this building to keep it in its original condition. Many other interesting features about this church, which we'll go through very shortly, is the fact it was also used as a village school, and there are still some benches here today heavily carved with graffiti by those early students. But on the subject of graffiti, this church is an array of amazement. There is graffiti that goes back all the way to the 15th century, carved on the walls of this church. And there are obviously references to more military aspects attached to the building. And if you wander around, you can find on the walls where people have sharpened their knives or swords. And at one point, as I can show you here on one of the arches, you can see carving, lateral scratch marks on the top end of the actual archway. Now, how did these cuts get all the way up there? Well, I think here, and I don't think this is a question that's been answered by anyone previously, I think that pikemen, soldiers carrying long pikes on long staves, sharpened the axe heads against the stonework, and hence they were left with these deep scars across the arch. And with some of the graffiti here, some of it is quite amazing, some of it is beautifully carved. I'm going to show you some examples here now. You often wonder what kind of control they had over this church, who was responsible for it, why did they allow these people to vandalise these buildings? Let alone from the graffiti, we have the medieval wall paintings, and we have a church which for many appearances looks early 14th century, 13th century French architecture. So this is a very special place, and I'm pleased that you've joined me for this excursion today. But before we go any further, let's look at the history associated with some of the religious decorations on the walls, some of which I can say are graphically quite horrid. As you can see behind me, there are some amazing medieval wall paintings, and perhaps, shall we say, a little sinister. If you look at the drawing or painting of St. Margaret with the two soldiers piercing her breast with spears or swords, this is actually a biblical reference. But to many people, when they see this, who, shall we say, are not as well versed with the teachings of Christ, would probably look at this in the modern context as being obscene. But what you must realise about the whole point of medieval wall paintings, the whole point of the Bible was to control the population and to ensure people, and we're looking at very basic peasants here who could not read nor write, to ensure that they towed the line with the church, a propaganda piece, to reinforce the control of the Catholic Church over England. And if you look at some of these pictures, particularly the demons, the suggestion here, if you do not conform to the teachings of God and to come to this church, then you are doomed and you will be sent to hell. And that basic reinforcement kept the congregation together for years. But somewhere along the way, something else has happened here. Is it because the church had become unloved and unwanted? Or is there perhaps something more sinister underneath all of this? When you wander around the church, some of the gravestones seem almost incongruous to being inside a church. There's one which is a representation of perhaps a soldier's grave or a knight's grave. There's a heavy, heavy stone over the grave on the floor of the church, and quite often people trip over it as they attempt to wander to the other side of the church from the chancel. It seems kind of odd that it's been placed directly there. And of course, the other interesting feature of this church is that you can actually see how the Christian church in England developed all the way up and after the Reformation of the church until its eventual demise in the late 19th century. The trouble with fragmentary history, and that's what we're essentially dealing with, is that you're often only left with part of the story. But even so, what still exists to this day is equally as fascinating as any other wall paintings that I've seen anywhere else in Europe, and these are quite remarkable, to say the very least. This is kind of curious for any building, and I'm actually sat behind what looks like a pew, but in fact is a school bench. And this bench is heavily covered in carvings and graffiti. One here from 1773, 1777, 1774. During the 18th century, obviously this church was not used as frequently as, say, perhaps its neighbour, St Peter's, and so for part of its history, it was used as a village school. And perfectly preserved here today are examples of some of the carvings and graffiti left by those early schoolboys. And this bench, which probably dates, looking at the dates on here, probably dates to the 16th century, and I'm actually sat behind it. And this is amazing. This is something that you would expect to see in a museum, and here it is in St John's Church in Duxford. And what a fascinating find. I'm actually standing at the moment with the chancel behind me, and I've actually brought with me today a K2 EMF meter. A K2 EMF meter. Now, recently, as many of you realise, I went over to Gloucestershire where I joined up with Forest Paranormal Investigations, and they made heavy use of EMF meters. And so by experiment, I brought this EMF meter with me today to see whether or not we can get a reactive contact with the lights here in this church. I'm actually feeling somebody at this moment here, a very simple soul, somebody who's disabled, a cripple. And I'm going back to the 15th, maybe 14th century. I'm not sure how the churches reacted with the poor and the crippled and the sick, but I can feel his presence here. Very plainly dressed, very raggy looking clothing, almost grey in colour. Anyway, my visit to St John's today is coming sadly to an end. We've been here for some considerable time, and of course we had to borrow the keys from the key holder, and inevitably, of course, they're going to panic as we've been gone for over 2 hours. So I think I'd best wrap up now. But before I do, I'm hoping that this church will provide on tape at least, and you can hear it today, some EVP or some indication of activity. I've certainly, for today, I haven't felt much and I haven't seen anything. But setting that aside, this atmosphere in this beautiful building, the whole ambience of it, the history, the culture and the background to this particular church is a fascinating history. And allegedly there are associations with the Knights Templar. Certainly nearby in Duxford is a chapel dedicated by the Templars, and there is believed to have been a connection between both. This church has a very strong militaristic appeal attached to it, and it would not surprise me for one moment if the Templars had some connection with this building. And what an amazing building. And thank God, perhaps, and I say this not disrespectfully, that the church became redundant in 1870. Otherwise, we could be looking at a Victorian Gothic nightmare. But instead, we are blessed with what the church would have looked originally without the interference of those Victorians. And on that note, I have to say it's time to go. As you can see, I'm in an absolutely splendid and wonderful location. In fact, I'm at All Saints Church, which is located in the village of Little Wenham in Suffolk. And when I say village, let's talk more of a hamlet, because the actual church is surrounded by farm buildings. In fact, over the back is also a stone-built house, Little Wenham Hall. The house and the church were built relative to each other in the 13th century. What is particularly unique about both buildings is that both contain examples of early English brick. In fact, some of the earliest recorded early English brick. Previously, when churches were being constructed, they attempted to use any local material that they could find available to them. And in this part of the world, the most common was, of course, the remains of Roman houses. And so from that material, which was stone rubble, from tiles, and from brick, they were able to construct these wonderful buildings. However, in this example, it is purely English, and the church has a very strong feeling of early English Gothic, and it kind of flows through it. Almost, I would say this church is full of many idiosyncrasies. I mean, particularly so with some of the wall paintings that have been discovered. The story here was that in the 1960s, one of the church regulars discovered that the paint peeling revealed the traces of early wall paintings beneath. And since being in the care of the church's conservation trust and being declared redundant in 1976, considerable renovation work has taken place in this wonderful building to reveal all of these ancient wall paintings. And of course, as one would expect, with the passage of time and over the centuries, the original bright and almost vivid wall colours have faded into very dull ochres. But even so, one is still able to see quite clearly what is left of them, the saints who are depicted. What I'm hoping to do with you today is to take you around this wonderful building and to reveal to you some of these wall paintings and anything else which I would consider relevant to my excursion here today. And what a wonderful place to have that excursion. Although it's very dull outside, we've just experienced tremendous storms in the last few days, and it's very dark in here. We've been able to rely upon additional lighting and other techniques to be able to share with you some of these wonderful pictures. The first thing to notice with these three wall paintings is that the figurines have black faces and black hands, and when they actually painted these faces they used a red and white pigment in lead paint, and they were preserved in that colour for centuries and centuries until they actually removed the covering, and of course the pigmentation is oxidised with the air and it's caused the figures' faces to turn black. But having set that to one side, this is still a fascinating capture of three famous saints which have been really pertinent to the period in which they were painted. And the first one here is St. Margaret, who's actually spearing a dragon. Now, what's particularly interesting about St. Margaret is that the influence of actually spearing the dragon draws its emphasis mostly from the Eastern Orthodox Church rather than the Western Orthodox. And I've noticed on some of my forays into churches and ancient buildings that much of the architecture draws very heavily upon earlier buildings created in the Middle East, and particularly at Bradwell in Essex is St. Peter's Church, which I believe was built in 654 AD. And its influence and design was drawn from churches in Syria and not in England. And yet here again we have what could possibly be a Middle Eastern Christian influence over the artwork of this church, which would also suggest that the painter, or presumably some of those connected with the church, may have served overseas. An example, of course, would be the Crusades and the Crusaders themselves. And so this is quite a unique figure. In fact, I'm not sure, I believe it's the only one of its type known in England. And sure enough, here she is spearing a dragon. Now, what is the political significance of this figurine, as indeed with the other figurines, which I will come to very shortly? Apart from their religious overtones, they also represented something else. Quite clearly, Margaret represents strength, the power of the church, to vanquish all evils. The evils in this case is the actual dragon, and the dragon would have been the non-believer, the Muslim or the Jew, or indeed anybody else of any other religion. In the middle panel we have a depiction of St. Catherine, and in one hand she's holding the wheel. And this representation, the wheel, is actually the wheel of life, which we all pass through as our lives revolve round in one continuous circle from the beginning and to the end, with all the events which take place in that life, and particularly so how we are equipped to deal with ourselves and the world around us. And bearing in mind we're talking in a period of history where pestilence and plague and disease and war was absolutely almost of plague proportions, and so many people, particularly those coming back from service in the Middle East, have died of all kinds of diseases. The worst, of course, during that period was leprosy. And let's take us on to the next figure, and that depicts Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene is holding an ointment jar. Now, there is a religious significance to the ointment jar and to Mary Magdalene, obviously. But there's an extra significance to it, because the ointment jar, if you like, this is a saint who people would touch. The ointment jar represents a cure from disease, a cure from all kinds of ailments. And this is based purely and driven purely by people's religious beliefs. The belief that as they've been found by any known medical men of the period around them, that they turn to the church in their desperation to be saved. And here this figure is holding that ointment jar. So there is another significance here, and it is very relevant for the period of history that we're talking about. I find all three paintings absolutely wonderful. And if you look very closely at detail, you can see the folds in the cloth, and you can see the characters and the expressions in their faces, which sadly are darkened with age. But what is still fresh about them is the hair colouring. The hair still stands out. So this is a wonderful representation of three famous saints, and again, extremely rare depictions, hardly found anywhere else in Britain. Let's move over to the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus. And this depiction is probably better than the other three saints put together. Here we have the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, lovely being cuddled by her. And looking on at either side are two saints. Quite who these two saints are, I honestly don't know, but it's indicative of the round light halos around each of the figures' heads. There really isn't much you can say about this. This is a statement of religion. This is a statement of purpose. And it is also a sign to many, many poor people of hope and inspiration. And I think to a degree in that period, this is what she actually represented. And of course with Jesus also represents life eternal. And each of these is either side of the main chancel window. But what wonderful depictions, and to think that they've existed for centuries without any detection until the 1960s, when through poverty and neglect of the church, it actually exposed these wonderful wall paintings which had long been forgotten since the Reformation of the church. And our last saint to meet today, in fact, is the one who greets you as you walk through the door. And in fact, I'm actually named after him. It's St. Christopher. This is a particularly rare and very unusual find. The wall paintings here date to relatively the same period in the 14th century. And even so, despite the age and despite its wear and the deterioration which has taken place over the centuries, the colours are still quite bright, and the imagery, particularly around the faces of St. Christopher himself and baby Jesus. As you can see, it's painted on the south wall, which greets the visitor as they come through the church door from the north side. And this is a traditional view of St. Christopher, and here it looks as though he's either holding the baby Jesus, and this would have been seen or perceived as a good luck charm for anybody who comes into the church. And so as people came through the door, here painted on the wall is St. Christopher. And although much of it has deteriorated, the quality and the expression of the face and the baby is still quite very real, and you can pick up quite some detail. And in fact, if you look at St. Christopher's face, he almost looks like he's in homage to the baby Jesus. This is a particularly fine example and very rare in English churches, because most have disappeared since the Reformation and have been literally wiped from history. But here we have this large depiction, and what a wonderful image it is. And of course the biggest problem with this, it has no gas or electric, so it has no means of keeping the building warm and dry other than the roof, is what happens in future centuries as more and more of this paintwork starts to deteriorate. And that is the big question mark which is facing the conservators of the charity who is responsible, which is the Church's Conservation Trust. And sadly, there are many churches like this containing many, many fine wall paintings and other historic details, which, unless they're looked after and unless they're maintained, are going to fade from the annals of history. My views of this church so far, I'm extremely impressed, despite its age, the fact that it hasn't been used for years for regular worship, but it still contains such a wonderful energy. And there's still one or two other tombs and monuments here to greet the visitor as they come to this church. Here is a tomb and monument to John Bruce, who was buried here in 1585. The Bruce family were a very powerful local family. In fact, they lived at Little Wenham Hall, which is next door, and obviously this was their local church. But what is particularly fine about this is the smaller details here, such as the spurs. Many churches that I've been to which have similar monuments have suffered excessively from damage over the centuries, and yet this is almost immaculate, complete with coat of arms and with these faux, and they are faux, marble panels. They're actually painted. But even so, the craftsmanship and the execution of the figurine, the face and the body and the whole background to this piece is quite impressive, to say the very least. And this is artwork that you can actually approach, you can actually touch it. It's not in a museum. If you like, you can regard these buildings as living museums because they continue forever forward, and all of these wonderful exhibits are here and available for people to come and to enjoy them. One thing that struck me about my visit to this church, on my last investigation, we went over to Duxford Church, and that church was the epitome of military hell. There was so much in that church which gave strong militaristic appeal. In fact, it was believed to be connected at some point with the Knights Templar. Here, the significance is completely changed. The emphasis has been taken away from war, from death, from purging people and sending them to hell. This church has a very feminine touch, a very gentle touch to it. There's nothing aggressive in this church. There's nothing that indicates war or malice or a forethought, as they did in the early days. This is a very peaceful, very loving building, whereas Duxford had that hard-edged militaristic appeal. And nowhere finer is that you can see that in the artwork of this building. There are no demons. There are no people being dragged off to hell. There is no message of warning to those who do not conform to the teachings of the church. Nothing of the sort. The nearest I could get to that was the Lord's Prayer. And there is nothing evil or aggressive in the Lord's Prayer. In fact, quite the opposite. And this is the general feeling, the general ambience of this church all the way through. A very warm and very peaceful church. But there is a slightly, and dare I say this, sinister side to it. And the sinister side being that when we were in here earlier setting up cameras, we quite clearly both heard a lady say, "Shh!" And that did quite take us back by shock, only momentarily. But while we've been in here filming today, and this is essentially a documentary about the history of this building, it has nothing to do with the paranormal per se in a direct manner, but we are picking up experiences of it. And these indications have been whispering, we've heard voices, and it appeared to be a lady in this church. And these voices are very loud and very clear. On a couple of occasions, we were actually minded to believe that there may have been somebody else inside the church, but there is nobody else here. In fact, the last visitor, according to the book, was over 2 days ago. And walking around outside the church, there are farm buildings, and there is a farmhouse, and there is also Little Wenham Hall. But there is no trace of any person wandering around. So it'll be intriguing to find out what type of activity we may have picked up inadvertently on our cameras. But for an experience, this is something which is much better shared. And I'm glad that you've joined me on this visit today. What was that scratching noise?
That's what I could hear. There was something moving down over there.
As you can see, It's painted on the south wall, which greets the visitor as they come through the church door from the north side. And this is a traditional And good evening, and it's just coming up to dusk over at Baconsthorpe Castle in North Norfolk. I'm joined with my friend Eddie Mallet, and you'll see a little bit more of him shortly, and we're going to carry out an investigation inside the inner keep. What I can say about this site, this actual keep behind me in the castle was built in 1450, which is rather strange historically because it was at the late medieval period when the siege cannon had been invented. And this building, despite its even robust appearance today, would not have lasted long under a siege. And the reason it was built, it was for a sociopath, a man by the name of John Hayden, who was a crooked lawyer, who was able to wrangle money out of many people, lords and ladies, nobility everywhere. But unfortunately for him, a lot of people were looking for him. And so he decided he needed a home base which could be defended. I'm sure if John Hayden had lived in the present day, he probably would be a politician or a very wealthy lawyer. But in this particular part of history, he came from a very poor background, and he was determined to make a stakehold on an estate which he held here at Baconsthorpe. And so it remained in the family for 200 years. They later built an outer gatehouse which was much more showy, probably to impress guests coming to the site, and by which time the family had evolved into weaving. And certainly they employed an army of weavers who created tapestries which were sold on the continent, which was quite unusual for that period of history because at that time the English mostly bought their tapestries from Flanders. So to actually employ people here on a localised basis, breeding sheep and using the wool for making these wonderful tapestries to sell and export abroad was something quite unheard of and quite remarkable. Their fortunes unfortunately waned, as they often do with many of these families, and certainly during the period of the English Civil War with the parliamentarians in power, they had caused offence to them. They were pro-royalist, but as punishment they ordered the family to demolish part of the castle in lieu of a debt which was owed. And in fact, quite a number of stone pieces from the original castle here were transported to build Rainham Hall, which is a few miles distant. So if you ever visit Rainham Hall in Norfolk, which is also famous for a particular haunting, you'll know that quite a large amount of stone was taken from the curtain walls and the inner gatehouse building and transported for building work on that estate. However, I digress. Here tonight I'm hoping to carry out a ghost box investigation at one of the two rooms on the inner gatehouse building. Now, if you recall when I was here last time, and again reference back to the original video, you'll see during the night investigation we picked up some very unusual light anomalies. What I'm hoping to do tonight is to be able not only to recapture these light anomalies, but also be able to pick up some EVP through the ghost box. A lot of you have complained about the noise that is emitted by the ghost box, and I do fully understand that. It would certainly drive me nuts, and being here and doing it at the same time is even worse. So what I'm proposing to do is to dampen the background noise, so all you can hear is the audio coming directly from the ghost box. Obviously, if there is a conversation between myself or Eddie with the ghost box, the audio will have to be raised to its normal full potential. But I'm hoping that by engaging with spirit here, particularly those light anomalies, there may be some kind of explanation as to who and why it's been done. I'm certainly glad to be back here. It's a beautiful evening. The sun is coming down very, very slowly. It has a certain aura and romanticism attached to this castle site. It's surrounded by a moat, and to one side is a large lake which is covered in duck, swan and geese and a number of other wild birds which nest here. It's certainly a beautiful, quiet and very remote site, which will be absolutely perfect for our intentions here tonight. I know Eddie is looking forward to it, and I'm just going to bring Eddie over to the camera now, and he will give you his feelings about what he's hoping to experience. Nice to meet you, Eddie.
Indeed, how do you, Chris?
I've taken the microphone off because that's the best way of interviewing you. Anyway, we're here at Baconsthorpe Castle. What a romantic and what an idyllic location.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It certainly is. And what are you hoping to experience here tonight? You've had a wander around the site. Have you picked anything up?
Very strong, very strong.
And whereabouts?
In the second one there.
Okay, on the left-hand side, going across the drawbridge, yeah.
Felt very strong in there. Certain amount in the other one, but definitely that one was the strongest for me. Although you said you had some great stuff in. Yeah,
I believe it's on the other side. We picked up all the light anomalies.
Indeed. And I must admit, I've been making the most of the wildlife, because you know I love wildlife, so I've been taking a few photographs of those.
It has to be said, Eddie is a birdie.
I am indeed.
And there's certainly a lot of wild birds here. It really is an impressively beautiful, wonderful sight to be.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. I love it. And the actual architecture, fantastic. And here's hoping for some wonderful stuff tonight with the.
But when you look at it, though, with the flintstone covering, it looks as though it's been built on the cheap, doesn't it?
It's a few really, really nice bits there, but I will have to say, yes, there are some areas that.
A quick defensive against enemy attack.
Yeah, I mean, so that window above that window is quite nice, and that.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
And just love the way how they got the row of stones just going right the way round there. That's quite neat.
Yeah, it has certain ornamentation, but it isn't like, for example, Castle Rising, which is a beautiful and substantive building.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm now going to prepare for the night investigation with Eddie. It's the light is certainly starting to drop, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very shortly. Okay, it's now getting dark, it's getting exciting, and the activity is starting to increase here slightly, and I'm hoping that, particularly so in this room, we're going to pick up some very interesting light anomalies and some EVP perhaps through the ghost box. Eddie's been touching into spirit like I have here. I can feel the atmosphere changing, I can feel a change in the fabric of the building. And I'm sure as nature goes to sleep in terms of day creatures, those that exist in the night will once more step out into the light and share themselves to us. And what about you, Eddie?
I'm hoping for a good night, I must admit. Like I say, got that usual sort of spiritual headache you can feel quite coming in quite nicely.
Where do you feel it mostly?
Usual, I mean, so different times.
I mean, in relationship to the building, yeah.
So basically, top of the head, going down like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another time, another location. You can get it at the side of the, sort of like in the temple. Another time you get it another side in the temple. But it's just different locations that sort of come in the same.
With relationship to this building, are you feeling one room being more active than another? Because we're actually in the gatekeeper's room. Next door is the steward's room. The steward, of course, used to service the upstairs apartments to the owners, the Halton family. Are you feeling more activity here, or are you feeling more in the other room?
Earlier on, very, very strong in the steward, and very little in here. But there was a slight feel to it. However, set the recorder up as I set the recorder up, it's now not feeling as strong in there.
But you're feeling it
But
here.
it's now come over to
Yeah.
this side. So it seemed to me as that might be that this one become more stronger as the night.
Well, as I say, from the last time we were here, we were picking up lots of light anomalies in this room, and I propose actually for tonight to start the ghost box session in here, and we'll see what we pick up. I'm going to have to keep the lights low because technically we are on property owned by English Heritage, and they certainly wouldn't want us to be on their property after dark, even though we're not actually causing any problems. But I'm certainly hoping that we have something compelling, something that you can be proud of with regard to paranormal activity that will find compelling and keep your interest in my work. And I'm very pleased that Eddie's joined me again, because as I remember last time, you were very, very happy that Eddie had joined me on the previous investigations, because we do tend to work quite well together. We both follow a similar line of thought and attitude with regard to the paranormal, so we're both hopeful that tonight our liaison here working together is going to produce some very exciting results.
Yeah, I feel it's definitely the same way as you. Not going out for the gun-ho attack. Just relax. Let things come to you.
Basically chill and let it flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just relax, call out, and just, respect.
Absolutely. Anyway, it's virtually totally dark now, so we're going to commence with the night investigation. We'll see how it goes. If we pick up a lot of activity in this room, we'll stay here. Eddie's got a locked off camera in the other room, so it might as well be here that we hope to pick up the activity which we can share with you. And thank you for tuning in. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
All the best.
Okay, we're now ready to start the ghost box session. As I mentioned earlier, I intend to tone down the audio because I know it is very irritating and very distracting, but obviously any meaningful responses or questions that we're going to ask or respond to, the audio will be raised back to its correct level. We're going to keep the audio from the ghost box speaker as low as possible anyway, but not too low that we can't actually hear what's being said. And this is always a problem. Somebody raised recently in one of my videos that you're not understanding what's being said. Well, when you're actually standing here and you're recording and listening to it, sometimes it doesn't come across as clearly as it does when you're editing. And I've experienced in some locations with the ghost box, the audio is fairly clear and concise, but in other places, less so. So it's always an issue and always a problem. Somebody mentioned buying an Oculus. I'd love to do so, but unfortunately my funding at the present time doesn't allow for that. That's why I started my Patreon account, which you'll see a link to below. And if you can join and donate, I can increase the quality and the range of equipment which I use on all of my shoots. As it stands tonight, I'm currently carrying, which is paid for out of my own pocket, around about £2,000 worth of equipment. And if I could certainly raise the quality of the cameras and the recording equipment, we can actually start moving a lot more forward. So I hope you're going to be there for me. Sorry for the ad plug, but we're going to continue. Thank you. Could anyone please give me an indication of your presence? Not a lot happening at the moment, but it's still early.
I'm feeling very apprehensive.
Oh yeah, there's a presence here.
Not very apprehensive.
Yeah.
Feeling sort of not knowing what we're up to.
Yeah. Please let me assure you, and you can scan us. None of us, neither of us have any form of malevolent intent. We're not here to cause you any issues or problems. I know that you exist on another plane, another level which is different to our own, and a totally different period of history. We are in the 21st century, and I suspect you are probably sometime, maybe 1600s, maybe just before then. So everything has changed from the world upon which you existed into the world in which we exist now. As I said, we're not here to cause you any harm or disrespect, and I just want to be friends with you, and so does my friend Eddie. He wants to be friends with you too. So anything you can say or communicate to us would be gratefully received and appreciated. Thank you. Is there anybody here who wishes to say anything, please? This is definitely the more active of the two rooms. Yeah, it never felt this way earlier, did it?
No, didn't. Could be the wind, yes, the wind had got me.
You felt a draft.
Yeah, all of a sudden, very strong. Ooh. Possibly a voice there.
What I'm going to do, Eddie, I'm going to change the sweep without FM and we shall see where we kick off from there. We're not picking anything up at all on the current settings, so let's change it again. Okay, if we have this device which is making this noise will give you the energy to be able to speak to us directly. Any friendly spirits of this castle, could you come to this room, please? Anyone here in the spirit, could you give us an indication of your presence, please? Okay, we're not getting much in terms of a response from the ghost box. It could well be that in this particular location, spirit isn't prepared to talk, but more of a light form energy. And of course the light form energy may not be human spirit at all, it may be something else. We're actually standing in the gatekeeper's room. I should imagine in the early days they probably kept their animals in here as well. Who knows? But I felt a male and female presence. I think the male was very young. And the same as Eddie is feeling, that whoever it is feeling apprehensive.
Very.
Yeah. So these are communicational issues that we may not necessarily be able to overcome. And I don't want to waste all my tape in one place, so we're going to carry on next door in a short while. If we don't get a response from there, we're going to go to the outer gatehouse by the car park entrance and try there. But at the moment, there is an energy and it's building up, but whether it's going to manifest itself into anything worthwhile remains to be seen.
Indeed. I will say, Chris, that before you actually start talking, there was a talk. Somebody came on in the spirit box.
Oh, there was?
It was, yeah. Very faint, but it was there.
I'll check it out then when I get back.
Yeah.
What was I doing at the time? Was I hitting?
Just then about to start. As that with them coming in.
Right, yeah.
Sort of like 3, maybe 4 words, and that was it.
So it's difficult. You never know what's going to happen wherever. Somebody asked me the other day if ghost boxes are so good, it must be random radio transmissions which are picked up everywhere, but we're not picking up any form of transmission, or very, very light transmissions.
100% don't seem even like.
Not like Scenting.
The difficult part of it is, we all know, you can't say one way or the other with
Not
spirit
at all.
boxes. If anybody challenges, you can't challenge her to come back and say, no, it isn't, it's spirit, because they do pick up on radio waves. However, the actual way, if you get a reaction to a question, that's where it all comes in. You know, like there's 1 or 2 saying we got real good reactions.
Oh, we got some very strong responses, yeah. But again, we picked up a lot of garbage as well, didn't we?
Yeah, sadly.
Wait, those
Have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, we're now off the ghost box. This is definitely the room where the light anomalies were picked up. Can't guarantee that they're going to come back, but you never know your luck. And where Eddie's standing was roughly where they were originally picked up on camcorder. As I say, what we'll do, we'll spend a little time here, and then we'll go next door, try a ghost box session If that doesn't work, then we'll come back to the handhelds. Just to show you, ladies and gentlemen, it's got a vaulted roof. I'm not sure whether it's going to show well on this camera.
That is beautiful, that is.
It's got a beautiful vaulted roof. And obviously some graffiti. These people that do this are complete and utter morons.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If they're not doing this, they're damaging gravestones. We are gentle people. We don't mean you any harm or disrespect. We're just trying to make a level of communication, and if you can do that, it would be wonderful.
Did you enjoy working here?
What was that?
It was an owl.
Oh, was
That
it?
one's a barn owl, that one.
Sounds like a fan belt on a car.
Yeah, screech owls they're called. Try and say anything you possibly can.
It's proving a little bit difficult in here at the moment, but we're hoping we can reach out to spirit. For sure, there is an atmosphere building here. Whether it's going to result in anything that we can capture on camera, well, remains to be seen. But we're keeping our fingers crossed, and we're going to stay here as long as we can, because this was definitely the room we picked light anomalies up last time. I've just seen one. I've actually just seen one. I hope the other camcorder's picked it up on the wall behind Eddie, but over to the shelf where the other camcorder is. I feel you. I can feel you. Please don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you, nor is my friend Eddie. We're both gentle people.
I'm hearing voices.
Oh. It's not horrible, it's just a wave of energy just went right across me. As I was tuning in, I'll keep my eyes closed because I can focus better.
Yeah, I do the same. Did you feel that apprehensive feeling?
I'm feeling that, but there's something else here, something that I can't quite piece together. And it's kind of disturbing me, not in a deeply psychological way, but it's disturbing me because there's another story here. Was anybody murdered in this room? Was that geese?
Yeah, they were geese.
Was there anybody murdered in this room? Anyone whose life was cruelly taken? Anybody who lived in fear of the Hayden family? Anyone who was a happy employee? Somebody who lived here, who was well accommodated and loved? But I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling a dark episode. But of course, when people go on paranormal investigations, everybody seems to pick up on a dark episode.
Indeed.
So I'm not placing a lot of leverage on that. But what I am placing on this is that there is an apprehensive reluctance that seems to emanate around this room. If only you could trust us, if only you were prepared to reach out to us. Please, could you tell me your name? My name is Chris.
I'm Eddie.
And Eddie's from Suffolk, I'm from Essex. And we've come a long way to get here tonight to be able to meet with you. And we certainly haven't come here to cause you any problems or disrespect. We haven't come here to damage this building, and we can see that people have caused damage here in the past. That is not our intention. Our intentions are peaceful. Our intentions are to make meaningful and friendly contact. And I want you to scan us both, because I know that you can read us. The overall feeling, actually, what I'm feeling is poverty mostly. Driving poverty.
I'm getting a feeling that somebody's waiting for somebody and they're not coming, turning up.
It's a kind of mixed medley of feelings here, isn't there? You know?
Yeah, it is.
And it is a beautiful place. This is one of the most beautiful locations I've been to. Not necessarily for the build of the castle, but the moat itself, the watered areas, the beautiful gatehouse at the front, which is in ruins. There's a romanticism and a magic that is difficult to transcribe, to film. You have to be here to experience it.
Possible voice there.
I don't.
And another one.
Really?
Yeah.
I just don't feel bad people here. I don't. It's so odd and so strange.
Hello. Somebody touched me leg there.
Yeah?
Yeah, brushed along by the side of my leg. So I'm thinking there might be...
I can hear a voice. I can hear a voice. Very quiet.
Cool. I think there's an animal in here.
No, I can hear a man's very, very quiet. A man talking. We are both believers. We know that you in spirit are as real on your level and plane as we are on our level and plane. We know that you have the same emotional responses that we do, the same feelings. We know that some of you are good and some of you are bad. Neither of us believe in demons or devils or angels. We believe in good energies and negative energies. I'm not feeling any negative energies here.
No, me neither.
It's kind of gentle. You say apprehension, possibly tinged with fear, perhaps.
No, I would say waiting for somebody. The apprehension.
Yeah, but I also feel that. I feel that with regard to us too. And this was...
Oh, sorry, Chris. I thought you were asking me what I was getting with the fear.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I'm getting more the case that they were waiting for somebody that didn't turn up.
I'm getting a pain in my left shoulder.
Uh-huh.
And a pain in my back.
I can't say that because for a simple reason I've got arthritis in my spine, so...
Yeah, no, it's just,
don't know what's
just here. I
spiritual.
feel it's very sore here. And it's not like I've been holding a camcorder for any length of time, but within my left shoulder joint, and my back, I know you're going to ask me a question. You're going to say to me on YouTube, is it someone who's attacked you? Are you feeling spirit sharing with you how they died? I think what's been shared to me is how they lived.
Yeah, arthritis.
Yeah. It's strange to get this. It's really stiff here at the moment. Yeah, but just here, my left shoulder here, it's very, very tight. And right at the base of my spine. Can you take this off me, please? I know you're sharing this with me. Please take it away from me. I can imagine the pain and the suffering that you experienced in your lives. It's weird. It really is. I think what we'll do, we'll pop next door, shall we? We'll try a ghost box session there.
Could be.
I'll grab out a camera. Let's grab it in.
Okay, just need to find the torch.
What's that?
Yeah, I've got to try and find the torch first of all.
Is the chief steward here?
Whoever it is, I feel you have, whoever you are, I feel you've lost somebody, a loved one.
Could you tell me your name, please?
You know that, Chris?
Sorry, Eddie.
If there was anything at the castle, if there's any loss of money.
Well, they were bankrupt at the time of the English Civil War.
Really? That's what I was getting, that they were having trouble with where the sorrow was coming in, that they'd lost the money. They had loads of money and they'd lost it.
Well, they didn't. Yeah, I believe it went on through relatives of the family, but they lost their fortune and they lived. The residue of the family, as it were, lived in the outer gatehouse, I believe.
I'm glad that came out correct. I'm sorry it's happened to you though. I really am. See that on airplane?
Oh, it's a jet, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier that we hadn't heard any aircraft, did we? How weird. We just heard a jet flying over the first time today.
But yeah, it's major loss here. That's where major sadness. Major sadness. I think we'll stand a good chance of getting some good EVPs.
We're not getting anything at all in the ghost box, so yeah, I agree with Eddie, as we did in the upper room. I'm going to deactivate it, but we're going to use the ghost box in the last building just prior to leaving the site. You see in this room, you see this room and this rough, almost cave-like structure. And yet, if we could cast our minds back to the time of the Haydens here, this would have been plastered, it would have had adornments, it would have looked quite pleasant, it would have had a proper floor. Now it's a roughly broken floor. It would have been a completely different world to what we are seeing it here today. And it's difficult sometimes to be able to touch in with that and to experience that, to see it. What we've just, I always find with EVP, as I've mentioned before, we tend to get EVP when we're talking, don't we? Yeah. It never comes across while we're standing there quietly. We're certainly not getting anything from the ghost box. And so, of course, you all expect from me another ghostly tale from when I was a police officer. And I want to share with you a story. We had a small house. It was originally the base of a windmill that had been converted into a dwelling, and it was a holiday let. But the owner of the property was concerned. He felt that items inside were being moved around, and he came back on one weekend visit. Although he never found any direct trace of human habitation, he certainly saw objects that had been placed from one area to another area in this very tiny dwelling. So he assumed that somebody had a key and they were allowing themselves into the building, and we're talking about a building that is in the middle of nowhere. And so he contacted the police on the premise that someone was sleeping rough there. So he gave us access to the building, And as myself and a colleague, we were sat there one night like tonight, and it seemed interminable. It went on and on and on, nothing happened. Then all of a sudden, it was a horrible feeling, and my heart was pounding, because this was, you felt like it was something evil that was coming to you. And we both felt the same sensation, and we heard footsteps, and they got closer and closer and closer. Then the sound of a hand went on the door, and we felt that we heard the door being opened. But what was strange about this, of course, that the door was locked. So anyway, we sat there, and we were out of breath with anticipation and excitement of what's about to happen. And so we got up and ran to the door as this hand, we assumed was a hand on the outside of the door, lifted a latch on a locked door. And we opened the door from the inside. It was a Yao lock, so we could easily switch the lock over to unlock the door, pulled it open very quickly, and there was nobody there. Absolutely nobody. We rushed outside with our flashlights. We ran across the ground at the back, which ran into a woodland, and there was no trace of any human. And yet we heard somebody walk to the building and open it. We later discovered, some years later, that it was indeed haunted, and that in the past the owner who bought this as a holiday let had no knowledge of its history, and it had a history of poltergeist behaviour, although I have to say nothing happened when we were there except for the sound of feet and the sound of somebody opening the door, which was locked. Anyway, we had a search. We came back to the building on the premise that if it was a real person, which we didn't believe it was, and the officer I was a complete skeptic, and but he couldn't explain how the sound of the door being opened when it was locked could be explained easily. And the owner of the building subsequently sold it because of people complaining about things being moved around inside the room while he was staying there. So it wasn't somebody who was actually sleeping rough. It was probably someone in spirit who was coming back to the cottage. But what was striking about it, the experience, the striking factor was that deep, primal fear that I felt and that he felt. And I'm not a person who gets scared easily, as you're all quite well aware, and certainly Eddie isn't. So anybody I know, I don't work with people that get frightened easily. And but on that occasion I was terrified, and so was this other officer. And we both could not explain how we felt. It was horrible. We could feel it in our chest. It was just this energy, this power was building up, and then it dissipated very quickly. We never heard, in the true sense of the word, someone running away. The footsteps just stopped. So we never actually got to the bottom of it, and of course now it was revealed that indeed it was haunted. And I often wonder what happens inside that base of that old windmill, which had been converted into a dwelling. I often wonder whether or not, even to this day, this cycle of events is still occurring there. So that is my ghost story to you whilst I was a police officer. I have a few more, but for now that will do. Anyway, I'm hoping, Eddie, having had this discussion about the paranormal, that we have picked up some kind of atmosphere here, some EVP or whatever. Your camera's running in the other room.
Yes.
So hopefully, if Eddie gets anything on there in the form of light anomalies, we should be able to see it. But when we talk about that fear, I don't feel that here at all.
It's nothing there, nothing at all. It's just sadness.
Yeah.
It's just reeking with it.
Anyway, look, the camcorder I'm talking to you on is actually running out of tape. So I think what we'll do, we'll pack up in this particular location and we'll retire back to the gatehouse, the outer gatehouse, pack the equipment away so we've just got the basic necessities, and then we can carry on there for a bit, and then hopefully we may elicit some kind of spiritual response. Okay, we're now in the outer gatehouse, which is the building you saw when we first came in. We've tried a ghost box session here, absolutely nothing at all. And so we're now going on to the old-fashioned way of investigating the paranormal on a camcorder, and we're going to be here probably for about half an hour, hopefully hoping that we can pick up some EVP or light anomaly. The atmosphere here, I don't feel anything at the moment. Do you ready?
Nope.
But you never know. The fact that we're not seeing anything or feeling anything doesn't necessitate that we're not going to pick anything up, especially EVP. So this is the building that was habited until 1920, when one of the pepper pot towers collapsed and rendered this beautiful building. And I've been saying to Eddie earlier, I love this house. It's just a shame it's a ruin, because this is a quality house. It's got a fantastic history, and I'm sure because it had more recent occupation here, we're going to pick up something worthwhile. So fingers crossed again, and let's crack on. Have a little scan around there with a camcorder just to show the viewers so they can see the that really lights up, doesn't it?
It does.
There's quite a breeze blowing through the windows.
Gonna try this.
Okay, and then if you go up, that goes straight
That's
up.
what I'm
into the
gonna
tower.
try and do.
Amazing, isn't it?
They're gorgeous.
They look like chimneys, but they're not.
Turrets.
They're just turrets, decorative turrets. Okay, I'm going to open up on camera. So let me. We come here in love, light, and peace. We mean no harm or disrespect. We've been down to the inner gatehouse here at this beautiful place. I love this house. I think this building is absolutely wonderful, and I'm so saddened to see that it is, as it is now, as a derelict ruin. And I'm hoping that anyone in spirit connected with this property are prepared to speak to us or to give us some sign or indication of their presence. We mean you no harm, no disrespect. And as I've said before, all you need to do is to scan us, and you'll know that we have no ill intent or any intention of causing harm or damage to this building.
Your female voice spoke while you were talking, Chris.
You did, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Heard
we'll
it.
see if that's on there when we go through it.
Heard it quite plain. So basically, just what it sounded to me is that it just went, oh, like that.
We've heard some really weird noises tonight, but
We have.
there's been nature, mostly
Yeah.
owls, isn't it?
But this wasn't nature. This was
No.
human vocal.
Let's have a little wander around, shall we? Let in see what we can.
Ooh.
There's a bit of a breeze coming through the window. Where I'm standing here, can you see the archway up here, Eddie? Where we're standing here, this is roughly 3/4 of the original length of the house. But if you look above here, and this was originally infilled, this was the original gatehouse entrance, so they would drive through here, and yet if we turn around here, we can see that they've put a modern doorway in. But originally this was much wider, and vehicular traffic would actually go through here. But since the house has been ruined, it's exposed the original entrance leading down to the inner gatehouse. So you can actually see how wide it was originally. This would have been bricked in, and it would have had windows and a door here. But sadly now it's exposed. So what you've got is the remains of the original gatehouse, the original outer gatehouse converted into a dwelling for a family who were connected once with the estate which once ruled over this area.
It is wonderful.
It's such a shame. It is as it is, and I think this is the most beautiful property as a ruin that I've been into for a long time. What am I feeling at the moment? Nothing at all. I'm seeing little lights. I'm seeing small energy spikes of light, but I'm not feeling anything. Any spirits of this house, the family that lived here in the 1920s when this beautiful house was destroyed, could you give us some kind of indication of your presence? Could you come across and tell us who you are and how you feel? We haven't come here to cause any harm or disrespect, and I underscore that because I'm fairly sure people have been here and have done disrespectful things in the past. But that is not why we're here. We are here to try and make contact with you. Now I'm feeling a sadness now. There's a lot of love here. I'm feeling a lot of love. I'm feeling a warmness. I'm not feeling anything negative. I'm not even feeling a sad loss. I'm just feeling the warmth that still exists in the fabric of this building. Again with Baconsthorpe Castle, to reiterate its haunted history, there's only one account of haunting here, allegedly a sentry in one of the towers, and apparently people walking past the remains of the curtain wall by the moat have seen a stone drop into the water, and when they've suddenly turned around to see who's throwing the stones, they've seen at the top turret of one of the towers a soldier, a sentry on duty. Now, that is legend. You'll find it on any web page concerned with the paranormal, but there is absolutely no evidence of this. I can't find anybody that has seen or experienced this phenomena, and certainly from my perspective, I just think it's just an urban myth. I think the real ghostly history lies in the fabric of this beautiful house and also the remains of the castle beyond.
Had a friend who was telling me he apparently was shot by an archer. It was sort of like, whoa!
What, here?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be coming here tonight, Andy.
Well,
yeah, that's what he was saying. He told me that say hello to the archer that shot me as I was coming through here.
well, that's a new one on me. No, I've never heard of the archer.
I can say that Andy is not one to make things up.
No, because the only legend here is the sentry who throws stones into the moat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice story, isn't it? It is a nice story, but it can't be validated, and that's the problem with the paranormal. But I'm hoping here we're going to pick some EVP up, definitely. Now, I am feeling people here now. I'm not feeling this emptiness. I'm feeling that there is a connection to people here now.
I'm getting a lot of wind coming in at the moment.
Well, if you stand with your back to the wall, look, if you stand over here, you'll cut the wind out. If you stand here, Eddie. Do you want me to take over a little bit, give you a break? What a shame, that beautiful late medieval archway incorporated into a much later property.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
And there's a doorway that used to lead into the rest of the house, which sadly is no longer. Another doorway there as well. I can imagine all the happy times that people had here.
I think they're 3 parties.
It's not an unhappy house, is it really?
No.
You see, I don't see these places as ruins, I see them for what they really were for. And this beautiful window that's sadly now derelict.
Yep. Wish I was picking something up from here, but I'm not at the moment.
No, I'm just getting a feeling of those that were here, but I'm not feeling anyone reaching out to me, which is not uncommon sometimes. And in the far distance, you can't see it, unfortunately. In the far distance is the inner gatehouse. I need to stand by the wall because the wind is quite strong.
You're wrong, I picked up quite strong here when we first got here.
What, energy?
Yeah, very strong when we first got here, but sadly it's seemed to now been dispersed. And yet I heard the voice. So that doesn't make sense, does it?
No, there are presences here, but I mean, I've been in many haunted properties where spirit is there, but it doesn't want to interfere with people, and I get that feeling here. But then on the other side of the coin, I just get a feeling that there might be some electronic voice phenomena. But we certainly didn't pick out anything at all from this site with a ghost box. So there's another theory which has been proven, that they don't always work wherever you go. And we're only a few miles distant from Cromer, and we're not too far away from a radio transmission mast, so if it's radio interference we should have picked up lots of it, but we've picked up absolutely nothing at all. Well, I dare say we haven't picked up anything. There were one or two very weak voices, but I think they were random radio transmissions, but I need to listen to that more closely to decide whether or not we have what we were seeking. But the atmosphere, the ambience, and I'll just pan out slightly, and you look around inside this beautiful ruin.
Can we go inside this?
You can go outside here, yeah. But it's the wind factor that's...
Oh, I didn't realise that.
There's no wind here though. Well, there is now. Okay, we're outside. We're actually still in the property as it used to be, but unfortunately the pepper pot tower would have been there, but it's now long gone. So we're left with the tragedy, the skeleton of the house that stood here. Yeah, the wind's getting stronger. I'm going to have to step into...
Yeah. I won't say whether that was a barn, whether that was part of a building or not these two, but...
Yeah, strong wind.
No, I can't think in here at all. And yet there's a few sort of hits and they're not good.
Yeah, it's just passing energy, isn't it? Well, it's not really picking up a great deal here, is it?
I'm getting absolutely massive on this way, right?
Sometimes you can go into a building and you start feeling an energy force, but here, nothing at all.
Earlier on, wow, it was very strong.
Yeah.
And again, maybe they're up there.
But we don't know whether or not we've got EVP, so if you look up to the rafters...
I think we might have one.
Well, I'll find that out once I've reviewed the tape, and of course the same with you as well, Eddie. You've got your tape to go through. So this is going to take me about 4 or 5 days to complete, so it's a bit of work here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've been here a considerable time. We started here, I think, about 6:30, and we've been here, it's now midnight, so I've had a long drive, and we've still got a long drive to get back to Brandon in Suffolk, where Eddie lives, and then from there I've got another long drive back to where I live. Anyway, Eddie, thanks very much for joining me. Have you enjoyed tonight?
It's been very interesting.
Let's put the camera over to you.
Okay.
Okay, impressions.
Sad, but what I picked up, I've been absolutely amazed by, because quite frankly, I don't usually pick up much. Usually just sort of come in like that. I wouldn't consider myself a medium or anything like that, but to pick that up, I picked up in the building there about the wreck and ruin of the building. It kind of made me very happy.
Like all good things, my time here has sadly come to an end, and so it's time to return back to my home in Essex.